Hi friends, it's Kirsten. Hi friends, welcome back to another Bible study. Today we are in John chapter 12, just starting out verses 1 through 11. So let's get into it right now. So verse 1 says, Then Jesus, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus is one of them that sat at the table with him. So basically, Jesus is now in Bethany. He is actually going to come to the Passover. Remember, we talked about how everyone was like talking, like, is he going to make it? Is he going to show up? Like, these Pharisees and the chief priests now want to kill him. But 6 days before Passover, he goes to Bethany, and Lazarus is there. And it says that Martha served while Lazarus sat at the table with the men and ate. So at that time, any type of kind of feast or dinner, supper party, whatever, it would normally be for the men of the village, and the women would serve. So here it says that they made a supper, and Martha served, and Lazarus was at the table with Jesus. So then verse 3 says, Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, hope I'm saying that correctly, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. So I love this because this is just a perfect example of how to come before Jesus humbly, how to sit at his feet. It's just showing honor to him. And Mary does that with a pound of ointment of spikenard, and it tells us that it's very costly. So as you'll know, I use Enduring Word as one of my resources when I'm going through these studies, just to help give me some clarity about what I'm actually reading, help me understand it a little bit more. So it actually said that when they would have these feasts and these dinners, that it wasn't uncommon for anyone who was coming into someone's home to wash their feet, cleanse, purify themselves before coming in. However, it was unusual for someone to wash someone else's feet while they were eating dinner. And at the end of verse 2, it says, But Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him. So that's kind of setting the scene and saying that they're already at the table, Martha's serving them. And then right into verse 3, Mary took a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus. So while they're sitting at the table, Martha is serving them. They're probably eating by now. And Mary gets on her hands and knees, and she starts anointing the feet of Jesus with this ointment. So then another thing that Enduring Word kind of let me know, because I was like, what is spikenard? It's very costly. Like, this is expensive. She used a whole pound of it. Like, this has got to be a pretty big deal. So Enduring Word says a pound cost about 300 denarii, which, to put that into perspective, was a year's worth of wage for any working man. So a man who was working, his wages for an entire year, a year's worth, is how much that would cost for the amount of ointment that she put on his feet. And then another really cool thing that Enduring Word said was that when she wiped his feet with her hair, that was a huge thing, because in that time, I don't know about now, again, I'm really ignorant to knowing how the Jewish culture is, but I know that it was very rare for a Jewish woman to let her hair down, especially in front of men, inside her home, outside her home, whatever. She never let anybody but her husband see her hair. And so for her to take her hair down and be using it kind of as a towel to wipe Jesus' feet in front of them and in front of Jesus was huge. And I just want to read this one part from Enduring Word that I think was really cool. It says, Mary is a study of devotion to Jesus. Luke 10:39, she sat at Jesus' feet and learned. John 11:32, she sat at his feet and surrendered. And now, John 12:3, she sat at his feet and honored him. And remember, y'all know how I always say John paid attention to every single detail and recorded every single detail more than any of the other gospels did. And at the end of that verse, it says, and the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. So that smell made a long lasting memory for him, enough for him to want to record it in this gospel. So then verse 4 through 6, I'm going to read it for y'all. However, I need y'all to know that when I first read it, I was like, who in the world? I didn't get offended, but I was flabbergasted. Verse 4, Then saith one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which should betray him, Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the bag and bare what was put therein. What? So y'all know, I've told you guys that whenever I read the Bible, I kind of have like a video playing in my head, and I want to piece it together to kind of like see how this is playing out, right? So I'm seeing this as a very awkward situation. So Judas is sitting at this table. He's eating with the men. Mary is down on her knees. She just anointed Jesus' feet. She's wiping his feet with her hair. And he's going to look up and say, why did we not sell this ointment? 300 pence? We could have given that to the poor. Why are we using all of this ointment on Jesus' feet when we could have sold it? So I'm seeing this is like an awkward silence. This is kind of like a, who are you? Because Jesus knows that this is the same man who is going to betray him. But when John said, because he was a thief and had the bag, Jesus made him like the designated treasurer of the group. He controlled the money. He took care of their like finances. So he didn't care about the poor. John literally said that. He said not that he cared for the poor in verse 6. He cared because he took care of the bag, of their finances, of their money for all of the men for their ministry. He wanted the money for himself. He was a thief. He didn't care about giving it to the poor. He was like, why are we using all this ointment on Jesus when like low-key I could have had this money? So then I love verse 7 and 8. Jesus is like, I'm going to stand up for my girl Mary because Judas, what are you doing? Verse 7, then said Jesus, let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. Verse 8, for the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always. So I love this for a couple of reasons, but I also want to go back to enduring word just for a second. It's better to be like Mary, extreme in our love for Jesus, rather than to be like Judas, criticizing others who show such great love for Jesus. Because to me, I'm taking this as Judas kind of has like, not a vendetta, but like something against Jesus and the fact that he's getting so popular and people are believing on him. And Mary is literally on her knees using all of this money's worth of ointment and wiping his feet with her hair. He's like, Jesus deserves all of that? Like, we could have sold that and I could have had more money. Like, we're doing this for him? So Jesus pretty much says, like, leave her alone. When he says, let her alone, like, leave her alone. She is showing her love. She is showing her dedication, her discipleship. She's showing honor. Just leave her alone. Let her do what she's doing. Because I feel like this is a good way to kind of what Enduring Word touched on, kind of apply to our lives today. And you know that when you start really living for Jesus and he's all you talk about, all the music you listen to worships him, you're in a constant state of prayer, like you are just known as the person who is on fire for Jesus. We all know that there are going to be those people who are going to criticize you for him. Be like, oh, there's that Jesus freak. There's that girl who always quotes scripture. There's the person who only listens to Christian music. We know this. I'm sure many of us have dealt with that type of persecution before. But right here is like the perfect example of Jesus appreciates it. Jesus values that love and that dedication that we give to him, that worship that we show him. And even when people are criticizing us and trying to put us down and tell us that we're doing too much or we're being too loud or we're saying too much about Jesus, he appreciates it and he's got our backs. He literally told Judas, who, let's put the fact that he's going to betray him over here out of sight, out of mind. Let's put that out of the way. But the fact that Judas has been one of his disciples, he's followed him, he's led in ministry with him, he's done all these things with Jesus and the disciples. And Jesus said, like, you're my disciple, you've been following me, I care for you, you're my friend. Let's not think about you betraying me. Like, he does bring that up, but like, let's just put that to the side for a second. You are not going to criticize. You're not going to make someone feel ashamed of how they worship me. Because worship is individual, it's personal, it is how you worship Jesus. And if someone criticizes you for what you're doing for the glory of God, Jesus says right here, he's got your back. He told Judas, let her alone, leave her alone. Don't criticize, like, he didn't say this, but my little commentary is like, check yourself. Because verses 5-6, John just called homeboy out, and now he's coming on to Mary, and so Jesus is like, no, like you need to, what's that saying? make sure your own hands are clean first. You know what I'm saying? So then I'm just going to read verses 9 through 11 together because I highlighted them all together. So verse 9 says, "Much people of the Jews therefore knew that he was there. And they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might see Lazarus also, whom he had raised from the dead." Verse 10, "But the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus also to death." Verse 11, "Because that by reason of him many of the Jews went away and believed on Jesus." So this is kind of big as well. This is going along with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the high priest. They're all plotting together to kill Jesus, right? That's their end game. That's their goal. However, here we see that they're not only trying to go for Jesus now. No, that's not good enough. That's not enough. They want Lazarus dead now too. Because they said all of these Jews are coming around and everyone is believing on Jesus and calling him the Messiah and believing that he is the one God sent. But what really got all these people to believe in Jesus was the fact that they came with Mary, you guys remember, and they witnessed Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead. And then word of mouth, they're all telling people, these people are witnessing everywhere. And so all these Jewish people are believing on Jesus because they're like, if he can raise Lazarus from the dead, like he just might be our Messiah. So for this Passover, they're all going to come together. They're all surrounding Jesus. They're all like, oh my gosh, this man might be the Messiah. He's a miracle worker. He raised Lazarus from the dead. And so these Pharisees and Sadducees are like, oh, so if we kill Jesus, that solves a problem. But now Lazarus is here, and he is quite literally a walking testimony of what Jesus can do. People are still going to see him and continue to believe on Jesus, even if he's dead. So now, verse 10, the chief priests consulted, they all talked about this, that they might put Lazarus also to death. So now the whole plot is thickening, and it's gone from, we want Jesus dead, that'll solve all of our problems, to now we have another problem and we gotta murder 2 men. So that is the end of today's Bible study. We went through verses 1 through 11 in chapter 12 of John. And tomorrow the title for Bible study is Jesus Enters Jerusalem. So that is only verses 12 through 19. So again, a really short one, but we are setting the stage. So we're coming up to the point of Jesus's arrest, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. I've told y'all, I think in a couple videos now, that I'm not looking forward to reading this next part, but I am very, very thankful to know what happens next and what happens after that. Because of that, we have salvation. So we got to get through it. We got to read it. We have to dive in and understand it more. So with that being said, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. And I will catch y'all tomorrow for the next Bible study. Bye.